Hello and welcome to the first episode of our series on programming a web application as part of competition Tour the App. Today I'll show you some basics and we'll start with what I'll be working with in this tutorial and how to actually start working on the backend. As you can already see in front of me, I'll be using bun as the runtime, which runs JavaScript or rather TypeScript code, so you'll need knowledge of TypeScript. And as a backend framework, I'll be using Elysia, which is built on bun, so it's just fast and has a very simple syntax. So let's go create a project right away. If you don't have bun, install it. If you have it installed, you can simply use command bun create and then your project name. For example, I'll put 30 video here like this and it'll download all the things that are needed. As soon as this command finishes, you'll actually have everything ready that is needed for the basics in Elysia. So when I open my code here in Visual Studio Code, I see that I already have package.json ready here. Well, as we can see, we have the index.ts file here, in which our web server will be run. Even now, when I actually open the terminal and type the command bun-dev, the command itself is actually defined here in package.json, and dev means it to run the server in development mode. And at the same time, the watch argument here does this. When I change anything in this file, it automatically updates, it runs again, and so that the most current changes are there. When I run bun-dev, it'll output that Elysia is running at localhost 3000. When I open a browser and go to localhost port 3000, I see hello Elysia here, which is exactly what is being returned here. Let's go over now how defining those routes actually works. If you have read the article on backend on our website tourtheapp.com, then you know that within HTTP we have about 5 or 6, I'm not sure right now, different methods. One is already pre-written here. It's the get method. It is basically the default method, which when you go to this page, the browser will actually send a so-called GET request to the server. Within Elysia, Elysia is always defined as an instance of the Elysia class, and some parameters are gradually set on it. Here, we already have .get, which creates the very route on which the GET request will be received. Here the slash signifies that it is the main page, or when I put nothing here, this call here will be executed. The second parameter here is a function, or a callback, let's say. Simply, a function that runs when the request comes to this address. So we could actually rewrite this into the full format. The only thing it does is that this returns the string hello Elysia to Elysia. And Elysia itself will actually do everything around it, like setting the data type and setting the status code and so on. Just like .get, we can also set, for example, .post. It can easily be on the same path. On the same path, you can have different types of HTTP requests, but I can't, for example, have get on slash twice. If I save this now, it'll throw either an error or it would simply override the first .get. So you definitely don't want that. But as long as there are different methods, it's fine. We can easily put .put here and also .delete. Here we have everything. Well, since these other requests besides .get are quite difficult to test via the browser, unless you already have some frontend that basically clicks and sends it for you, I recommend using some tools for testing APIs. It'll come in handy, especially when you start adding things like authorization, adding cookies, and who knows what else, because then you'll simply have to look for how to generate such requests, and these tools will make it simpler for you. So while you can use something like Postman, there's also Insomnia, and for example for me, I use a tool here called Bruno, where basically all those definitions, where all those API requests are saved for you in so-called collection, which you can save to a repo and then you can share it among your devices. So I'll create a collection here in Tour the App video, or rather in TDA video API, so I can tell what's what. Make sure to pick developer mode here, because otherwise you won't have all the functions there. Anyways, when I click on the three dots here, I'll select new request, let's say a request for the root path. So I'll put localhost on port 3000 as the request URL. And I'll press the center row here, so you see it also outputs hello Elysia here. But here I can switch from get to post, which now returns nothing, because if I put, for example, return hello TDA here, it'll return hello TDA, and so on. These paths here can be defined in two ways. There are so-called static paths, which are simply some text, so I can put something like tour the app. So when I then put here, I'll put get here and type /tda, then it's the path /tda. However, you can also define a so-called dynamic path, which, at least in Elysia, is defined like this. You put colon parameter, and then you won't write, for example, in the browser bar colon parameter, but anything you put after / blah 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 will be passed into Elysia, and you can work with it precisely as a parameter. So for example, for you to get this parameter from Elysia actually passes the context object to that callback function. However, it's simpler than writing a context, because there are a lot of things in there that you'll use all the time. So it's simpler to split or destructure, or however it is called in JavaScript. Basically, you put curly braces here. We'll need the attribute from that Elysia context object, which is called params, in which all the parameters from the dynamic path are stored. We can actually define more parameters here, and you can easily combine it with static things. So here you can also have, for example, TDA, and this TDA here will not be dynamic, but these ones with the colons will be. So now, when I destructure it here again, even VS Code will automatically suggest what I defined in the path. So I can take parameter and ini parameter here, and I can now say that instead of returning hello Elysia, it'll return I received a parameter and ini parameter, and it'll literally take those variables. When I open my API collection here, I'll put /ahoy /tday /sveta and hit get. It returns I received ahoy and sveta, and when I change, for example, sveta to YouTube here, it'll write I received ahoy and YouTube. This is how you can easily insert dynamic parameters into your path. It's especially useful when you have, for example, database requests, so you don't actually have to get the ID of a given record. You don't have to, for example, get it from somewhere from the body or query parameters, so you'll have it directly in the URL. And I mean, like, it's kind of nicer than when you generate the API specification. It will be much clearer. So definitely use this destructured context that Elysia will be returning. There are many more things in the tutorials, we will talk about it. Within that destructured context object, there are a lot of useful things. For example, you can of course get the body of the request, but there's also a property which is called set, and it allows us, besides returning some data, to set a status code. We set.status. First we enter the status code. This is either the numeric code, like we know for not found, or its name. So let's put here, for example, code 204, which is no content, but it'll return content because we are cool. To return content, you'll just return the data as usual, and it'll be sent with the status code. When I save this now and run it, I get no content, and it doesn't return anything because it thinks that there are nothing there. But if I put 201 here, for example, it'll return I received ahoy and YouTube again. But the code up here is changed. This is how you can return all the status codes that you normally find in HTTP requests. And that is all for now. If you get bored before the next episode, definitely don't forget to go through its documentation, because there are a lot of interesting things. I think there is a very simple guide on how to get started and how to understand the basic elements of Elysia, what it contains and how to work with it. In the next episode, we'll show how to do some basic so-called CRUD operations, or create, read, update and delete, which are the basic functions that you'll be working with in the database. And I'll show you how to connect an SQLite database to your projects and how to work with a ORM, or object relational mapping, which will significantly make our work easier. Thank you for watching, and definitely leave some feedback. Everything. I'm signing off. Take care and happy coding!